everybody. Welcome to Figma Collaboration and Content Curation for Creatives with Brandon Parker as a part of our second annual Midwest Design Week. My name is Ashton Spann and I volunteer as co-vice president for AIGA Cincinnati, one of the 70+ chapters of AIGA, the Professional Association for Design. So this week, as most of you probably know, if you've been checking in on other events throughout the week, we've been really excited to feature a lot of events that focus on our theme this year, Access to Design. And make sure that you go ahead and join the Slack community so you can stay on top of any updates on event information, other further readings, things like that. This event itself would not have been possible without the support of our sponsors for this year. So thank you so much to Saatchi & Saatchi X, the University of Arkansas Graphic Design Program, Creatives on Call, Salesforce, Deckel and Moneypenny, and all of the other many sponsors that have helped to make Midwest Design Week 2021 a reality. We are grateful for your support and honored that you have entrusted us to fulfill our goals for Midwest Design Week in a meaningful way. That being said, we're going to go ahead and get things rolling. I'm really excited to introduce today's speaker, Brandon Parker, who is also a co-worker of mine at Kroger, which is awesome. So Brandon Parker is a digital designer with over 10 years of experience in the digital design experience. Brandon notably served as both UX and UI designer for Procter & Gamble, helping to provide guidance on users' behaviors and best practices, while also creating delightful user interfaces for one of P&G's global skincare brands. Most recently, Brandon has taken a role as a product designer at Kroger Digital, where he provides valuable design input in the digital experience pillar. For years, Brandon has been working in the areas of user interaction, trying best to understand how users interact and navigate throughout digital experience, as well as how those interactions are improved in the areas of device features, loading times, content prioritization, accessibility, and other best UX and UI practices. Without further ado, I'm gonna go ahead and hand things over to Brandon. You can go ahead and share your screen and we'll go ahead and get started with our walkthrough of Figma.
Awesome. Thank you so much for that kind introduction there, Ashton. I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Yeah, lots to share here with Figma. Eager to get started on that. Before I do so, just want to go over a couple of things. First and foremost, from a technical side, just want to make sure everyone's able to see my screen, that there is no issue there. So if someone
might need to share your other screen, Brandon.
Share the other screen, that'll do it. Let's try this. Okay, is everybody able to see now?
Yes.
Awesome, thank you for that, Nick. Appreciate that. So Figma has been on the conversation block with people who are in UX UI for some time. For those of you who are less familiar with Figma, it's a cloud-based platform that works through your browser. And essentially what it does is it's a UX UI prototyping tool. In a lot of ways, it sort of takes its beginnings from like what we've experienced on Sketch in terms of creating UX and UI using applications. So basically just sort of starting on this first slide that we have here, one of the things that we realized was that Figma sort of caught our attention in a lot of ways because of COVID-19 and the disruption to our workflow and working in offices. It made working remotely a reality because now we had an application where we could version control our different screens, our different mockups. We could collaborate with these screens with other people who are on teams. We could have handoff for developers. And so in a lot of ways, Figma's success is kind of hand in hand with what's happened with the pandemic. But now that this has happened and remote working is a reality, we think that Figma is going to be something that's sort of here to stay for a while. It's not going to be going anywhere. And as such, we believe it's important for our designers to be versed in understanding this technology and how to use it. So just wanted to kind of put that out there. Second disclaimer, you guys have probably heard this one all before, which is the tool itself does not make you a better designer. It can help you to be a little bit more productive and sort of ease and being able to do some of the steps necessary in UX UI, but it does not necessarily make you a better designer. That is all practice and process right there. So just wanted to kind of level set on those things. I included a couple of UX UI designer tips just from my own kind of experience, sort of where to start. I like to always say use a grid. It's essential for screen layouts, and it will ensure that you have a consistent baseline. That's a feature that is also sort of automated in Figma as well. And we'll get to that shortly. No need to reinvent the wheel. In our business, you know, we utilize a lot of resources to kind of fill in the blanks and do the work. It's not necessary for us as UX and UI designers to go in and do iconography every time that we, you know, go into doing a site or doing an update. Sometimes it's possible to use resources like UX Planet or other types of kits that are out there where you can find some assets to use. The goal for us is always to work very quickly, and we find it easier to start from general structures, or to start from wireframes, or to start from, you know, existing elements that we may be able to find useful in our UX UI. Again, we reuse components. If you know, let's say you're working on a form field and you created it once, chances are you may need to reuse that again. So you may find yourself sort of stockpiling components for different use cases that you might have in the future. Never leave anything to chance. Try to account for styling on every level and creating a style guide that includes the instances of the use cases, so that someone else who may be looking at your design file will be able to understand all of the different, you know, elements that you have on that file. The last one here is kind of something I recently added, which is to think mobile first. We're finding now that more and more of our users are finding their digital content on mobile devices. And this is a huge opportunity for product designers as well as other groups to take advantage of the technology and start thinking about content prioritization for the mobile device instead of it being an afterthought. So just wanted to put that information out there. So we're going to kind of start from the beginning on this, which is some basic sort of tips and tools, right? So I'm going to exit out of this particular one with our slides, and I'm going to go into another file that I already have open here, right? And so this particular file that I have open here is just Basics of Figma. And this is actually created by Figma, which is awesome because they have some really good educational resources that are available to the public to use. I was able to get this resource right here that explains the basics of Figma, so we can quickly go through that. Before I do that, I do want to kind of explain the UI of Figma, what everything is first. So we're going to start over here to the left. This is where you have your layers, and everything that you draw in Figma will show up on the layers palette over here to the left-hand side. And on that panel to the right of layers, you have assets. And assets is going to be where all of your components lie. If you don't know what component is, that's okay. Stick with us, we'll explain what that is. And that's all we're going to focus on for right now, is these two. Up here to the top is our basic Figma menu. This is where you can go back to your file selection. If you're just starting Figma, I'll just show what that kind of looks like. If you're just starting, you'll have your information right here, and you'll have all of your drafts. So this is where our project is for this particular presentation. So once you create a team and you invite people, it'll show up down here. Otherwise, any files that you create will be in the draft section. So we'll go back to that and go back to that Figma Basics. The other things that are included in this menu is you have your file, which includes new design file, placing images, saving locally, save version. We won't get too much into this because I want to make sure I'm saving enough time for the design and editing side of things. But these are sort of basic things that you would see in any type of graphic program usually. Edit, view, object, anything associated with an object that you've selected. You can use some of these editing abilities on. Program does use vectors, so you have the ability to do some things with vectors here. Text, here's some options for text, arrangement. Plugins, I'll spend a little bit of time talking about plugins. Plugins are great. Anyone who's used a graphical type of program knows how plugins can be really helpful in sort of trimming your time down at times. As you can see here, I have quite a few of plugins. If you are ever in the interest of finding more plugins for Figma, what you can do is you can go back to files, and in this tab down here, this area down here where it says community, you can go click on that, and they've got a whole section for plugins. So as you can see, you have plugins based off of trend, accessibility, but I would highly encourage anyone getting started to take a look at the plugins to see what they might find in there that might be useful. I found a lot of them extremely useful, so I would highly encourage everyone to try that out. All right, back to our prototyping. And as you can see, it's that easy to get back in, back out to your files. And so this particular tool right here, the Move tool, we've seen this before in programs like Illustrator and Photoshop, and that's essentially what it does. Is it, you click on something and grab it and you can move it. Scale tool has that functionality. It basically scales in order to make sure that the scale is uniform. You want to make sure that you're clicking on over here on the properties palette, the constrained proportions, just to be on the safe side. This particular tool right here, you have frame. And so frame is basically taking the place of what we would call artboard on Illustrator. We have slice tool. Slice tool is also a callback from Illustrator and Photoshop as well. You can slice up parts of an image to take little individual parts of it and export out as images. I do not use that feature as much, but nevertheless, it's still there. This particular tool right here is the shape tool. And as you can see, if you just hover over it, it'll tell you what the tool is. So you've got a rectangular tool here, you've got a line tool, you've got an arrow tool, an ellipse tool, polygon tool, star tool, and a place image tool. And this place image tool will actually place an image from any folder that you have on your computer or your desktop and actually place that into your Figma file. You have a pen tool here, which is basically your vector tool, which you can use to create points and endpoints and unique shapes. You have a pencil tool as well. This is our type tool, text, hand tool for movement. And this tool is basically for commenting. Figma gives you the ability to comment on designs with your collaborators so that you can quickly make a comment, post it there. But when you're working on the file, it doesn't show up and interfere with your work. It only shows up when you're on the comment side of things. So we'll do a little bit of demoing of that a little bit later. So just so you guys know, I'm looking over here to my left. I'm actually have dual monitors. So I'm looking at my Figma screen on the left and looking at you all on the right here. So that's what's going on there, just so you guys know. So, oops, sorry, go back to the wrong files here. Let's go back. We want to go to the Figma basics. Sorry about that. So back to the Figma basics. Let's start with the first quick lesson, which has to do with frames. And framing is simply what we talked about, which is taking this tool up here and creating a frame. As I said, frames are artboards. This is where any content you have will go live. This is the screen that we're designing for, whether it's a desktop or a mobile. You can choose the size that you want. As you can see on the properties dialog to the right, you can actually see the X and Y position as well as the length and width or height and width of the actual artboard itself or frame. So constraints basically we use constraints when we have a height and width of a particular element. And what we want to do with that is we want to make sure that we're keeping our constraints the same, because we may be using elements like this button multiple times. So it's critical that we make sure that we're have some type of constraints on these graphics so that they're being consistent. So the way we're able to adjust the constraints is with this dialog here on the properties. As you notice, this one is set for left and top. What that basically means is the left side of this particular element and the top side of it. And so in this particular exercise, we're just going to focus on the frame. And we've got some additional content that's below here. So all we're going to really do is resize the height so that we can see that content. So again, doing that over here in this properties dialog, as you can see, when I mouse over the H on height, it turns into this little arrow, which quickly allows you to kind of pull this out a little bit. And once you pull that out, it reveals a little bit more of the images that's on that particular page. So this is a very quick way of and as you notice also, this particular component right there is staying sticky to the bottom as well. And that has to do with the constraints, because it's constrained on the bottom and sides. If it was constrained on the top, then it would stay towards the top. So this is a helpful feature for, like, say, a footer or something like that, that's at the bottom of the page, that you can, you know, change the height of the page without changing the placement of that particular footer. Sure. Selected on the actual frame again. Same thing with this one. We're just adjusting the width on this one. So what do we notice here? When we take this and we move the slider to the left, what's happening is all of our boxes here are actually changing size. And if you look to the constraints, it's because we have top, left, and right constraints selected. So that as we move this frame, all of those buttons also, sorry, that was the height, the width, all of these buttons are also moving at the same time. These are important sort of time-saving features when you're working on UX UI and you need to make rapid changes quickly, to understand how the constraints work on your elements. So as you're changing different sizes and things on your frames, that you're maintaining that integrity of the height or width of your elements that are actually on the frame. Very important right there. Components, all right? So components is gonna be one of the things that you use the most in Figma, because components, you create them one time and you reuse them. We used to create these all individually one by one, but over time, we've learned how to do components on Sketch, and that has been something that we've also carried across here in Figma. So Figma very much is sort of influenced by Sketch. And so that was another build that Figma added from Sketch that really makes workflow a lot easier. So what we want to do with this particular thing is we want to duplicate this component. Creating a component is fairly simple, and you'll see that when we're doing our actual mock-up, that if we need to create a component, we'll right-click on that to create a component. There's also a shortcut key, which I believe is the Command and the Option key in K to create a component. But then there's also a little, see if I can show something real quick. There's also a little indicator that you can use up here at the top of the screen that will create a component. And you click on that and it'll make it a component. So what we're gonna do is we're gonna duplicate this component here, because we don't wanna use the same component, because once you change a component, you've changed it globally everywhere. So I wanna duplicate this component. So I can either a copy, or I can hit Command D to duplicate it. I just hit Command D on my keyboard to duplicate that. Just like Illustrator and Photoshop, there's a number of ways to copy and paste or duplicate. So what I'm doing right now is I'm actually placing this. I'm going to place this on top of our frame here. And as you can see, we have another component added to this list on chats. Once we have this duplicated, one of the things that, let's say we wanted to change this for some reason, like we wanted to add an image there. So what we would do is we would detach this symbol. Once we've detached it, we can find the background over on the layers palette. I'm going to use one of my plugins here, which is basically a stock photo resource. Unsplash. You see this dialog popped up. I'm just going to grab an image, insert that image. As you can see, that image is inserted. I can dismiss that dialog there. The image is inserted, but it's not necessarily being, masked by that ellipse there. So what I want to do is I'm going to drag this above the ellipse. I'm going to right click on the ellipse in the layers palette. I'm going to click use as mask, and that essentially makes that abstract image now in that in this circular area. And you notice that some of the other content went away. What I'm going to do is I'm going to drag these above the content so that they show back up and it's not masked. So that's a really quick, easy way to understand how components work. We took the component from here, we detached it from its instance to edit it, and we've changed it. And if we wanted to, we could make this a component again and give it a different name. So just really quickly wanted to explain how components work. Next, we're going to go into styles. And styles basically is your copy. It's for, setting up what you want your body copy styles to be. You can go in and change the color. You can change the typeface. Setting this basically sets up your type styles in advance so that anyone coming behind you, they will be able to browse and see the different type styles created that you're using. If you need to establish what your H1 is going to be, because you have to have H1 for your website, you can do that in your type styles. So we're just going to do this really quick. So we're going to select this. And I'm just going to copy and paste this here to create another text style. So I'm selecting it. If you click here where it says text style, give it a name. So I'm just giving it a name. If you want to change the attributes of the text style, you can go here. All right, so I've changed that text style. Looks different than the other ones. Say, let's change the color on it too. Go back to this little properties. It's like a mini properties icon there. Let's see what else we would change on that. As you can see, there's more details on the type style. So looks good to me. We're going to move on to smart selection. So the way smart selection works, which is really, really interesting, is you select multiple objects. And in selecting more than one object, you have the ability to kind of swap out objects. So start by grabbing 3 or more objects, right? What you can now do, now that you have those selected, you see these red circles here? You can take those red circles and you can use them to swap out images very quickly. So you can completely change the orientation of your visuals without having to go in and measure out with guides and incrementally nudge things over, which is extremely helpful and helps out with your time in terms of being able to do things very quickly. Same thing here, I can adjust the spacing. I'm holding Shift key again to multi-select. And now that I have those, I can change the size of them all at once. And just like the other example, if I wanted to, I could swap out. Yep. So moving on to exporting. Exporting, you want to grab the entire frame when you're exporting. You want to go all the way down to the bottom of your properties. And then in the properties dialog, you'll get the opportunity to select which particular type of format you want to use. You can export as a PNG, as a JPEG, as an FBG, or a PDF. SVG is actually really, really useful. I found that I can export from Figma as an SVG and import into Xd and still continue editing on that. So that's kind of a good build right there to know. But once you click out export, it'll actually download the export to your downloads folder. You guys probably didn't see that up in my downloads arrow up here, but it downloaded that photo and now it's in my downloads. This image of this screen is now in my downloads. So super easy for exporting. Commenting, we touched on that a little bit. Commenting, you go up here to the comment, add comment, put your comment there. Post that there. And what that does is you can, for your collaborators, they can leave comments on the work that you're working on. It doesn't interfere with the work because the moment you click off of the comments section, they go away. But you can have comments throughout the entire page. As you can see, there's a couple of comments on there. One from my partner Vernon there. So yeah, that's the comment section. So now that we've kind of gone over the basics, what I'm going to show to you right now is really kind of a teaser, but it's to sort of cue up what we're going to try to do for you guys in our time remaining. So I went to another tab, and this is sort of basics of prototyping. I won't spend a lot of time sort of talking about prototyping. Suffice to say, prototyping is what we do when we want to demonstrate the experience or the journey flow to someone else, and we want them to have a realistic experience of what that looks like. So what that basically does in Figma, similarly to Xd, is when you go to the prototype, click on the prototype dialog, which is next to design on the properties menu, you can actually see these little arrows. And what these arrows do is they point to the screens and where they're going. So different buttons, different areas actually go to different parts of different screens. And you can very quickly go in and change these. So you can go in, you can grab these handles, you can move them back and forth very, very quickly. And when we're testing this, when we're taking a look at this, we hit the play icon here or up here. And what it'll actually do is it'll open up a new browser window. Now, you guys probably don't see my browser windows because I'm sharing the other browser window. But what pops up is a iPhone screen that has our prototype on it. So technical limitations of Zoom not showing that up right away. I could stop sharing and pull that screen up and share, but I'm not going to do that because I want us to move on to our actual demo. But what I wanted you to understand is when we're talking about the journey, the user journey, this is what we're talking about here. This is what we're getting into when we're talking about UX. Where does this screen, what happens? Where does the user go from here? And this is how we put the prototype together in Figma, and then we test it. So we're going to do that in our little exercise, time permitting. So I'm going to exit out of here, and I'm going to go back to our file that we're working on. Wow. So if you look here, you can see several different things that I have, right? Oh, hello, Vernon. There's our partner, Vernon, who's going to be helping us out with our demo today. But let's start here on the left-hand side. So starting on the left, what I have is a style library. And this is, sort of a condensed version or a mini version that I've put inside of Figma so that we can actually see all of our different components and elements. So I've got a logo here. I've got all the colors that we're using, all of our typographic styles, all of our iconography. I've got some interaction styles here. And I've got some spacing. And then last but not least over here, I've got all of my components. These are sort of block components or elements that I've put together to make larger molecules that can be dropped into a layout very quickly. Again, components are reusable, so you want to make sure that you're using components in Figma. So we have a PDP selector component, we have a delivery component, we have this sort of rewards component here, frequently bought together, ratings and reviews, rating, actual rating. We have like a product tile there, return shipping, header. This is a carousel right here. Got some breadcrumbs, got a footer. So really it's a lot of sort of thinking ahead on the experience that you want to have and thinking what the user will need to experience and what they will need to have along this journey. So moving over here, what you can see that we've sort of populated beforehand is we've created some wireframes here. And what our goal is, what we're going to do here during this time, is we're going to take these wireframes and we're going to turn them into more finished mockups like what we have here. So wireframes just kind of indicate where everything's supposed to go. And we've done our homework. We've already created our components and styles. So we should be able to go in here and drop those components and put in those images to really kit out this wireframe. Now, looks like Vernon has already started on one of the wireframes up top here. He's already starting to put some images there, which is again another cool feature about Figma. As you can see, Vernon is working and I'm working, and Vernon can simultaneously work on one of these frames at the same time I'm working on it, which is a game changer as it relates to collaboration. Instead of waiting to get a design file from a designer, or not having that design file because it's on a desktop somewhere, here with the cloud, we're all working together in the same space, and we could be a lot more productive. Just sort of full disclosure, this may come out in the questions, but I know there has been some real collaboration efforts on the Sketch side of things as well as the Xd side of things. I've had an opportunity to play around with workspaces on Sketch, so it's pretty good. It's I would say it's not quite where Figma is right now, but I know they're working on real-time collaboration. with Sketch, and so they will be continuing to refine that. Haven't had an opportunity to work on the XD real-time collaboration feature, but one of the reasons I still believe there's a reason to believe in Figma is the price point. A single user can sign up for Figma for free. There's no cost. And if you want to add additional seats, you can get a license for it. But being able to do this type of prototyping and creation at no cost or little cost is extremely attractive to freelancers, to smaller startup groups, fast, nimble moving groups and teams. So not that I'm saying XD and Sketch are not as good as Figma, but it seems like they're still trying to get that real-time collaboration, whereas Figma has had a little bit more time to work on that. So see some questions there in the chat. I'm going to try to address some of those while I'm working. Vernon, you go ahead and continue to work on your mocks up there while I'm answering questions and working on my mocks over here. So question I have is, what are the advantages of using Figma over something like Adobe Xd? I've heard of Figma prior to this, but haven't used it until this presentation. Having it be web-based is pretty nice. Yeah, I agree. Having it be web-based is pretty nice. You're not held captive to a particular type of computer, so you can have a Mac or a PC. You don't have to be burdened necessarily with having to download the desktop. You can work on it on the web. Although, just so you know, there is a desktop application that you can download for Figma. I haven't tried it yet, but I will be working on that for the next presentation. So keep those questions coming if you guys have them. I'm going to continue to work over here and try to lay some stuff up. I'm going to click into our assets over here because, again, we've already done our homework. Using our assets, find our header, drop that in there. I like to use these sliders over here to be a little bit more precise in terms of the number. That's just a personal preference there. Once I have that layer, I can get rid of the rectangle that's there. Actually, let's do this. I'm going to backtrack a little bit. Sorry, folks. Let's do what Vernon's doing up there. Let's keep the integrity of that wireframe in case we need to reference it. We're going to pull this up here so we're working on the same level and the same speed as Vernon there. And just so you guys in the audience know, my colleague Vernon here does not have a traditional UX UI background. And so he's learning Figma also for the first time here. But since working with me on this little exercise, he has become quite functional at working on these layouts in Figma. So thank you for doing that, Vernon. And for you folks out there, just so you know, there's not a whole lot of learning curve that you necessarily need to have as it relates to working on the tool. Again, it's the process and the practice that make the designer, not the tool. You can understand the tool, but you still need to have that practice and understanding of UX UI. So I dropped my header into my landing wireframe. Next, I'm going to go into my carousel, my hero carousel here. Ah, there's a comment there. Veronica is using the desktop app. Oh, awesome. Yeah, she's saying it's pretty much the same. I have not had an opportunity to dive into that, Veronica, but I can't wait to try it out. I've been so immersed in using the actual cloud version that I just haven't had a chance to download it and dig into it, but good to know that it's pretty much the same thing. That's good. All right. So I'm just going through these one by one. Got our header rotator. So let's start off with that rotator. We're going to take this component apart. And then we're going to add an image to it. I've got some images that we're reusing for this particular demo. They're all here. Just going to grab one of those. Let's just grab the yoga pose. Just copy and paste. Just strictly copy and paste in here. Going back up to our rotator. Put that there. Another question. Says sometimes export Figma files so I can bring in Xd. What function does Xd do that Figma does not? I'm not suggesting that that Xd necessarily does a feature that Figma does not. Suffice to say that I've had instances where I was working in Figma and someone was not working in Figma. They're like, oh, I'm working in Xd. It's like, okay, well, they still need to be able to work on the design file. So one of the things that we want to do is make sure that they're able to work on that file. All right. So you notice when I did that it went blank, and that's because there was no fill on it. So make sure you put a fill on what you're masking, otherwise the fill won't show up. Check. How's it coming over there, Vernon? Looks pretty good. You've got some images over there.
Hello, everyone. I'm sitting here working, thinking I'm live. I'm going well.
That's all right, Vernon. For a minute, I was thinking you were like one of those teachers on the Peanuts, just you're unseen and unheard.
That's a wonderful thing.
Does Figma work the same way as XD, that the coding can be compiled to send off to software developers? It's a good question. So while he's doing that, while he's working on that, let's show you what that actually, what he's speaking on right there. So if we go over here to the properties, we have an inspect feature. So what we can do is we can use that and we can go here to like this header and we can look at the properties on that header. This copy down here, this can be copied and pasted, or you can share this file with your developer and they can copy and paste this particular code snippet. So that's how you get that handoff to developers, is they can go right into this file, they can see the styling on it, they can copy and paste it in their CSS, done deal. Go back to design over here, try to knock out some things. grab a couple more of these images over here. Dude, Vernon and I collaborate often real time. We don't really get an opportunity to as much as we'd like to. In terms of divide and conquer, that may be something that you guys sort of discuss. I know when we talked about this, we kind of decided that he would focus on a couple of pages independently, and then I would start on a couple of others that he hadn't started on. So whatever methodology you think works for you in terms of dividing and conquer the work is going to work best for your team.
Yeah, I think with any situation, the ability to work quickly is very important. And I think this kind of shows the fact that you can get things done expediently. In your own little world, I think designers really like to get within their own space, get things done. And we both can do that in real time, which is awesome.
Yeah, thanks for that build, Vernon. It's so true. I think as designers, one of the things that I know frustrates me is when you're sort of in a holding pattern and you're waiting for someone to deliver you a file or bring you a file, or let's say you're waiting to get a mock-up from someone. Well, imagine what happens if we're working on the same mock-up as someone like this in real time, and you're able to sort of work independently. You're able to provide your comments that you have to that other designer if they're away from desk, that when they return, they can see those comments. So again, it's that real-time collaboration. It's that ability to collaborate, to move in an agile situation. That's what's critical in what we're doing in digital. And that's how this tool is helping us. Keep those questions coming, folks. We got just a few minutes to keep flowing these in here. I got to catch up to Vernon. Vernon's almost got all that stuff laid in.
Such a slow worker.
Oh, that.
See, you can take shots at each other too. It's awesome.
Let's see, it's a question here. What options do you have when prototyping in Figma? Can you include anchors to scroll down, overlays to appear at the top of other frame artboard, transition like swipes and fades? Yes, you can include those things in Figma. They do have hot points to show you where the areas that are active and live where you're supposed to touch. As it relates to overlays appearing over the top of another frame, they have you can change the transition in your prototyping. You're able to set the easing in. Those kind of transitions, swipes, fades, pushes are all possible in Figma, just like Xd. Good question. Can I do prototyping while Vernon's in the session? Well, we're going to show that that's possible. So I'm actually going to go back to files. I'm going to go back to this prototyping copy, right? And what I'll show you guys that I didn't get a chance to show you while Vernon's still working on that is I'll show you the prototyping side of things. And so I'm going to pull this up. I'm going to stop the share and I'm going to reshare again so that you can see the prototype. So just bear with me while that's doing that. Right, I'm gonna stop the share. I'm gonna share again. Oh, got the beach ball here. Okay, now you guys should be able to see my desktop on this side, and you can actually see the prototype. Just somebody go ahead in the chat and let me know that you guys are able to see that. Cool. All right, so from here, it shows you, if you just click anywhere on the screen, it actually shows you where the hot points are. So if I want to register, click on there, takes me here. Here's the next. Sign up. Still has scrolling ability. Buttons here show you where they want you to press, where they want you to go to. Search. Again, this is directed us where they want us to go. Comment section. User section. So that was just to basically demo the prototyping ability. Hopefully that answered your question there. But again, let's go back to our other file. See where Vernon is on this. Vernon's got pretty good clip on me on the landing page, but I've got to cheat because I already did the landing page. So that's what happens when you get to own the file, Vernon. How you like that? I've caught up with you right away. All right. That being said, this was not a competition, but now we will come after Vernon with this category page. Any more questions? Keep those questions coming. We're almost at time here.
I'd say, Brandon, someone asked if there's a chat feature to talk with other designers as you're both working.
Interesting. I do not know that there's a chat feature that's not specific to actually working within Figma. But I do know that their community, the Figma community, which you are able to access when you go back here, they're constantly growing and they're constantly adding more information and elements to their community. But I don't know that they have a centralized design hub for design speakers to communicate. But I will endeavor to find that out, and I'll be glad to post that in the Slack channel.
Cool. Do you want me to, do you want to go through some more questions, or is there more in the demo?
Yeah, we're going to let Vernon keep doing that while I try to answer these questions, because it looks like the question board has come alive here.
Let's see. Do you feel that version control is different with Figma?
Yes, different in the fact that every application handles version control a little bit differently. What I do like about Figma, or Figma over some of the others, is if there's a version control, if there's a new version that comes out, that you have the ability as the user to be able to, you know, dictate what happens with your files. As it relates to the actual application itself, when a new version of it comes out, Figma is really good about notifying its users about updates that it's added to it. So hopefully that answers that question.
Yeah. And then we got another question saying, when you're doing low fidelity work inside of Figma, do you prefer to just draw rectangles, or are there unique tools for those elements?
Right. So when he's saying low fidelity, I think what he's speaking to is just like the boxes itself, like indicating where everything is going. I don't use any particular unique tools for that. The square marquee has kind of been there as a mainstay for a while. I continue to use that, but that's not to say that there aren't plugins with things already kind of baked into it. As I pointed out earlier, I think it's even more important to use the right plugins for your workflow, to be able to manage your workflow and manage your project, to do things very quickly. I think using the plugins is going to help you do that. That example with the stock photo is a perfect example of a plugin that you just click on it, it drops the photo in, you're off and moving, you're done. You're not thinking about it. Versus the time and energy that it would take to click out, go into the browser, look up a stock photo, download it, all of that's taken care of. So that's an example of a 2 or 3 part process that's been condensed into one click of a button. I saw this question, I'm going to answer that. Can you bring sketch files into Figma? Yes, you can do that. I don't have a demo of a sketch file in this particular presentation, but you can simply import it into Figma. You can add it into your drafts. It's that simple.
Cool. And then we did get another question from Veronica, who asked, like, have you tried sharing your Figma files on your portfolio, example, embedding prototypes or using a public link?
Yeah. I personally, I haven't done it that way. I probably should try to do that, Veronica. There was a time being where I was taking my mock-ups and I was actually trying to do more animation kind of stuff. So I wanted to really have some interesting features to them. And so that is something that I definitely think would be useful, is embedding that prototype link so that people are able to see it, that it opens up in a browser. It's like, oh, okay, here's a prototype of that. Oh, nice work. But I also think a lot of that has to do with, typically on my portfolio, I'm putting finished work, I'm putting like completed websites. So I might just have like a link to that actual website URL along with a couple of screens. But who knows, Veronica, I might start doing that thanks to you asking that question.
Yeah. And then looks like we got another question in. It says, can you share Figma files read only, or are they always editable?
Right.
So that last question.
That depends a lot on the license that you purchase. So the free license allows you to have up to 3 files and I believe 2 other contributors, right? Those contributors can be granted editing access. But I think anything more than that, you have to increase your license.
Makes sense. We're just about at time. If you guys want to, I don't know if you wanted to do an overview of the files that you and Vernon work on, and then I'll go ahead and do the outro and get us out of here.
Absolutely. So as you can see, Vernon was able to quickly do his PDP page. He won the race, clearly. Not because you're faster, Vernon, but because I was answering questions. So Vernon was able to get these image assets in here while I was kind of putting along, trying to put in for the category page while also talking to you folks. So what you're able to see here is just in a brief period of time, because we spent most of our time just sort of level setting on, what are the tools of Figma. But since the time when we opened this file, Vernon has already dropped in the image assets for these pages. So even though we didn't complete the entire demo to where we're gonna like prototype this out, just in the time that we have, you're able to see how quickly he's able to make those changes and drop those things in.
Yeah, I just wanted to say real quick, I think the main point that's important is that you have your artboards or your assets set up correctly. And once you do that, you can get your UX done. And once that's done, it's very easy to collaborate and go ahead and populate the layouts as needed. So it was very simple only because of how Brandon set it up.
Thanks for that build. Yeah, pre-work makes the dream work here, in the fact that if you're able to do as much anticipation of what you're going to need, what your user's going to need, you're going to make that experience of page building that much better.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Brandon and everyone. Give Brandon another round of virtual applause for his presentation and demo for Figma. And thank you to Vernon as well for helping out and sharing your insights as well. And thank you to our audience for joining us today and for all of your great questions. Before we leave, I wanted to give another shout out to our sponsors for this year's Midwest Design Week. Thank you for all of your support and making this happen. Have a great rest of your day, everybody.